The Soulsborne franchise has always been known to depict or allude to touchy subjects and topics in their own unique way. Some of these topics that comes to mind are oppression, lack of intimacy, death, and a lot more. But today the topic I wanted to focus on is a bit different. I would say it's even a bit more weird. And what I'm talking about is the peculiar abundance of incestuous stuff in Elden Ring. Now you guys might be wondering what the fuck I'm talking about, and before you click off this video, just hear me out. First of all, I think abundance isn't really a good word to describe this since there's only two examples, and also the term incestuous loosely fits those examples, because one of them is basically a different, more extreme form of it, and the other can be interpreted as someone just wanting more power for themselves. Now, I might be missing a couple pieces of lore, but I haven't seen any of the other Soulsborne titles show or at least hint to what I'm talking about today, only Elden Ring. Now, this might be because Elden Ring's world building was written with the help of George R.R. Martin, and I don't really know any of his other works, but I heard a lot of incest is depicted in Game of Thrones, but I might be wrong. So today I'm going to go over the two examples of incest in Elden Ring and see how FromSoft approaches the topic, and also how they convey the lore around it as well. But before I get to those examples, if you guys are interested in Soulsborne content, make sure to hit the subscribe button and also like the video. Anyways, before I get into the first example, there's a story I wanted to tell. The story of Narcissist. Narcissist was a man that lived in the city of Thespiae. He was well known for his beauty, and because of this, people, even those of the same gender, made advances onto him. Despite being wanted by literally everyone, he was not interested, therefore rejecting all the advances. One day he was walking and he eventually stumbled upon a river. In this river he saw something, or in better terms someone, and upon seeing that person for the first time in his life, he fell in love. However, there was an issue. The person he fell in love with was none other than his own reflection. This made him really depressed and sad, and knowing that he could not physically love the person in the reflection, he ended up taking his own life. At least in some versions of the story. Now you might be wondering why I mentioned this. Well, a part of it is similar to the first example I wanted to go over in this video, and that's the story of Radagon and Marika. Remember when I said that the term incest is going to be a loose definition? Well, in this case, Marika and Radagon's relationship isn't so much of incest but instead self-cest. And this is because Marika and Radagon are the same being. Look, I know it's confusing, and to this day I'm still not quite sure how this works. Did Radagon exist before meeting Marika, or did Marika create a male clone version of herself to carry out some plan? Who knows? But it definitely shows that these two, while technically being the same person, have different motivations, and this is shown in the opening cutscene of the game, where we can see Marika destroying the Elden Ring, and then after that we see Radagon trying to restore it. So while Radagon may be Marika, they have their own separate goals. Since Marika destroying the Elden Ring is shown as rebelling against the greater will, Radagon fixing it is shown as him still being loyal to it. To put it simply, they are the mirrored version of each other. Now, before Marika destroyed the Elden Ring, she and Radagon actually had a relationship where after leaving Queen Renala, he returned back to the capital and became Marika's consort, which is basically a fancy term for husband or wife of a reigning monarch. In this case, husband. Now later on, Radagon and Marika went on to have children, the twins Melanie and Michaela, and another child named Mesmer. At the moment, we don't know if Mesmer's father is truly Radagon, but it's clear that Marika is his mother. However, I do have a feeling that Radagon is in fact his father, and the reason why I say this is because he has the red hair, which only children of Radagon have, and his name also starts with an M, and Melania's and Michaela's name starts with an M, and they are both the children of Radagon and Marika. So it's safe to assume that Radagon is his father. Now speaking of children, Melania and Michaela are a bit different, and it's not because they are twins, but it's the fact that they are both cursed. Melania is cursed with the Scarlet Rot, which might be because the outer god of Rot chose her as a vessel for its powers, and Michaela is cursed to forever being in the body of a child. Now in the real world, when two people that are closely related have children, they tend to be born with some type of birth defect, most of, if not all the time. However, in the world of Elden Ring, this seems to be far more worse than just regular birth defects. I mean, not only do we have two beings that are technically the same person who most likely share the exact same DNA and gene makeup having children, but these two happens to be godlike beings as well. So it makes a lot of sense on why their children would come out having some type of curse. Again, one being cursed with scarlet rot and the other being cursed with eternal youth. However, there's an outlier here, and that's Mesmer. From what we saw of him, he doesn't seem to have any type of noticeable curse, but who knows, he might actually have one. And again, since both Marika and Radagon are gods, maybe no curse was passed on to him, but instead their other two children, due to luck being on Mesmer's side, I guess. I don't know. Now, the main reason why I compared the story of Narcissist to Radagon and Marika in the first place is pretty simple. It's because they both follow a story of people who fell in love or is attracted to a mirrored version of themselves. Now, the consequence of incest in Marika and Radagon's case seems to be their children being given gruesome curses. And because of these said curses, they play a somewhat large role in the story. I'm going to get into what those roles are later on, but let's move on to the next example, and that's Mohg and Miquella. This one is the weirdest out of the two in my opinion, and that's saying something because the previous example is literally a more extreme version of incest. However, the reason why I found this one even weirder is the fact that Miquella is forever cursed to look like a child, and Mohg wants to be Miquella's consort. Remember, a consort is a husband or wife of a reigning monarch. And not only that, Miquella is his literal half-brother. Now, many people interpreted this as Mohg not wanting to marry Miquella in a literal sense, but just simply using him for his own personal power gain. And I would agree with this, but the dialogue that Mohg had when talking to Miquella just sounds a bit off. He says, "Dearest Miquella," while gently touching his arm, "you must abide alone a while," which comes off as him talking to someone who he's like laying in bed with and leaving them to do something. I don't know. Which I might be wrong, but it definitely gave off that weird vibe. But after reading Mohg's remembrance, you can tell that Mohg is definitely a weirdo. A part of his remembrance reads, "Wishing to raise Miquella to full godhood, Mohg wished to become his consort, taking the role of monarch, but no matter how much of his bloody bedchamber he tried to share, he received no response from the young Empyrean." That right there was enough for me to come to the conclusion that Mohg has some type of weird incestuous affection towards Miquella. And that's not even the worst part, as Miquella is also forever cursed to look like a child. And I forgot to mention that Mohg literally kidnapped him in his sleep. So not only is Mohg into weird incestual stuff, but he should definitely be put on the offenders list as well. So earlier I was speaking of the consequences that incest in Elden Ring has on the people that partake in it, and to answer that, let's first talk about Marika and Radagon's case. Remember when I said that the curses of their children led them to partake in a somewhat big role in certain events of the lore? That's because, for example, if Malenia wasn't born or cursed with the Scarlet Rod, Caelid would most likely not be destroyed and overran with the disease, which also means that there would be no fight between General Radahn and Malenia because she doesn't exist. Or if she did exist, she would have most likely lost that fight due to her not having the power of the rot as a last resort. And if Miquella wasn't born, then us the Tarnished would have no way to access the Lands of Shadows, where a lot of the different important events takes place. And then again, even if he did exist, then there would still be no way for us to access the Lands of Shadows, since Miquella wouldn't be kidnapped by Mohg, because remember, the only reason why Mohg was able to do that was because Miquella placed himself in a cocoon in order to remove the curse of eternal youth from himself. Him not having the curse would mean that part of the story would definitely change. Now for Miquella and Mohg, the consequences being that due to Mohg's actions, Miquella's physical body is tampered with mid-transformation, which isn't anything too crazy, but if Miquella was left alone in his cocoon, then things would have turned out differently. First of all, Miquella would find a way to cure Malenia, allowing her to be free from the rot. He would also go further with his plans and most likely create his own version of the Golden Order and create his new age or era, competing or overtaking the Greater Will. And there you have it, the peculiar topic of incest in Elden Ring. From Marika and Radagon's mirrored existence and children to the unsettling relationship between Mohg and Miquella, Elden Ring doesn't shy away from exploring unconventional themes, and as we delve into the lore, it becomes clear that the consequences of these intricate relationships have a profound impact on the game's world. Curses, conflicts, and unforeseen events all stem from the choices made by these godlike beings. But before we wrap it up, I just want to say thank you for sticking to the end of the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested in more topics like this, and also check out the Patreon in the channel description.